Welcome everyone. I'm Rick Sterling from Western IM. I'll introduce my partner Troy Sawyer, who's as most of you know that have been on the sessions before. Troy makes sure we're all working according to oil here in the sessions and looks after that side of things for us. My partner Brian, of course, that helps with the advertising material and things like that. Brian's away this week, but just thanks to Brian as well for all the work he does behind the scenes to make sure that the IM Canada Connect sessions are happening on a regular basis. So just a quick definition of IM Canada Connect sessions for those of you that may not know what that means. We work with all the chapters, ARMA chapters in Canada. Western IM themselves, we have our own series called Learn With Us, which some of you may know and have been on in the past. That next one, Learn With Us series, is coming out on the 4th of December. So if you haven't got an invitation to that now, then just go to our website and you can sign up right on the website for future Learn With Us sessions at westernim.com. The IM Canada Connect is a joint scenario from all the ARMA chapters in Canada. All the ARMA chapters put on at least one presentation throughout the year, which gives us an entire year of Canadian content. So proud of all of our ARMA community in Canada here for continuing with educational opportunities for all of us across the country. Today we have Lewis Eisen. Lewis is, of course, not just one of our great speakers in the country, and I call Lewis the policy whisperer. We're also good friends as well, and I appreciate Lewis coming on today. I'm not going to really introduce him. I'll let him kind of talk a little bit about himself when he gets on. But the good deal here is that for our IM Canada Connect, we will be having our Christmas session, which we always have. For those of you that know about that, we always have in December. Troy is womping up something really cool and interesting for us for the Christmas session. And then we already have our January session booked for, you'll get advertising material for that before the end of the year as well. That's Courtney Bain will be doing that from Halifax, so the Halifax chapter. Lewis, I'm going to say you're from the Ottawa chapter, and therefore you're doing the Ottawa chapter thing, even though I haven't heard much from the Ottawa chapter this year, but thank you for doing the session nonetheless. I'm going to step away and let Lewis do his thing. So thank you again, Lewis, and I'll let you speak to you and your session on your own.
Hey, thank you very much, Rick. And thank you for putting this together. And Troy, thank you for operating things in the background. And thank you to all of those who have put your identification where you're coming from and land acknowledgement in the land area. It's very nice to see you've got people all the way across the country. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, pardon me, on me. I think most of you have come across me some way before, but I cut my teeth on IM, which is why I still spend a lot of time working in the IM world, although much of my time is really concentrating on teaching people of all the different corporate capacities, security, IT, etc., how to word their policies in a way that gets rid of the toxicity of traditional language, so that in fact we're getting less resistance rather than more resistance. So that's what I normally do. And as part of a sort of, I guess I consider myself policy drafting expert, comes a question on what value is there at all of ChatGPT in drafting policies. So what I'm going to do is give you a scenario and going to give you a few minutes to work on it. Now, normally when we have a few minutes, we do this in breakout rooms, but because of the particular structure here, it's not available to us now. So what I'm going to do is give you like five minutes or so of reflection time to jot down some notes. So you'll have some answers, and then we will come back and share all this information as a group. Okay, so you consider yourself a one-person breakout room. Imagine you've come into a conference room, and as usual, you sat at the very back table and everybody else is sitting in the front. So you are a breakout room. You're just in your own little breakout room all by yourself. So here's the problem, the context we have. let's assume we're all working at the same organization. Obviously, we come from various areas, so we have differences, but for the purposes of this scenario problem, let's assume we're coming from the same organization. And the person that we all report to, director, DG, whatever level that is, vice president, has come to us and said, we need a new information governance policy. So I've been told to tell you to go to ChatGPT and get one for us. And he sort of, go ahead, do that. And as he's turning around, walking out of the room, he sort of turns back and mumbles to himself, if I can get ChatGPT to write the IG policy, do we really need all of you to do any of this? Like, do I really need so many high people if ChatGPT is going to be writing the policies? So the question is, what is the answer? What do we come back to him or her, the boss, and in response to go get a policy from ChatGPT? So I've got a few preliminary comments before I set you thinking on the answer. First is, and this is the only sort of general information I would give you, we're talking about large language models here. AI is a huge area. This one focuses on the large language models like ChatGPT, and there are others, so I'm not particularly promoting one over the other. I happen to have a ChatGPT account, but they're not large thinking models. They're not research models. They're not large factual models. They are large language models. So their fort is managing language. Okay, so we understand that going in. When you come back with your explanation on what our answer should be, I'd like you to ignore things that apply to everybody. So for instance, security concerns, privacy concerns. Everybody has privacy and security concerns, not just us. So to talk about, well, we can't do this because there are security attacks. Yeah, everybody's got that. Let's assume those are dealt with. Somehow we've got to the point where we've brought either the technology in-house or we've put in the safeguards. We've dealt with the security concerns. We've dealt with the privacy concerns. I also would like you to assume that we've dealt with the copyright issues, because those issues are also very generic. So I really want to focus just on how do we respond? The request is for an IG policy. And what do we need to respond in that particular case? I'd also like you to ignore hallucinations. That is, we know that the computer comes up, the language model comes up with things that are not true and is very convinced it is true. My most recent story, I have to tell you, I was watching an episode of a television show, and somebody was posting a message on a message board that was like, I don't know, our future is together, and something very fancy. And it turned out it was a coded message to meet them at a Chinese restaurant in the evening. So later in the show, we see this meeting at the 7 o'clock, and it was a coded message. And I didn't want to flip back. I wanted to know what was the original message and see if I can understand the code. So I asked ChatGPT, I'm watching this show and this episode, and early on, there was a message given, and it was actually coded. What was that message? And it said, oh, yes, there was. That message was, meet me at the Chinese restaurant. I said, no, that wasn't the message. The message was in code. Click, click, click. The message was, looking forward to dinner at 7 p.m. No, that wasn't the message either. You don't really know the message, do you? No, I guess I admit I don't. So it isn't just a matter of hallucinations. There's also somehow this drive to please. And if you've used any of these things, I think you see that it really bends over backwards to be helpful. And let's ignore that fact that some of the help it gives us may be entirely made up. I don't want to ignore the fact that it doesn't exist, but the fact that, because we know we're going to get some information which is incorrect, but let's ignore that the fact that some of that incorrect information is a hallucination rather than retrieved from somewhere else that believes it's true. So those are the three cautions. The last thing I want to leave you with is I've run this program a few times, and when I start asking people to report, okay, what would you tell the boss in the situation? They always start with something like, well, you can't use chat GPT and da 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 da. And I'm going to stop you right there. Okay. This answer has to start we, not you. Because as soon as we start with the you have distanced yourself from your problem. You are not part of the solution. You have separated yourself and you're not helping. So if we're going to be helpful, it has to start with, yeah, we could use ChatGPT, and here's what you need to know about it. So it needs to start that way. And as we start putting in our responses, I will be listening for the you and the we. And please don't, take offense if I correct you on that. Because the answer is, what is our response for this that they want in the firm? Okay, so is there anybody who doesn't understand what the instructions are? You're welcome to raise your hand. If you raise your hand, Troy will enable a voice.
Yeah,
So
sure.
it's all. Sorry, go ahead, Troy.
Oh yeah, I was just saying, yeah, I can do that.
Good. Okay, I don't see any hands. Is that correct? I don't see any hands. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not seeing any yet. Yeah.
So I'm going to give you 5 minutes just to take some notes or so, and then we'll review them. So you've been asked, go get a policy, an IG policy for us from ChatGPT. Okay. You have to go back and give an answer. So what's the answer we're going to give? Give you 5 minutes starting. I've got 14 after the hour. So let's go to 25 after the hour, say. No, 20 after the hour. Wherever you are, 20 after the hour, and we'll pick it up.
Sounds good. You're muted there, Lewis. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. Hopefully, there's been enough time for everybody. And I hope that you've been able to, at least record 2 or 3 points, etc. And there will be some duplication, but I wonder if we could hear from as many different people as possible. So when we're starting out, at least at the beginning, if you could just limit us to 1 point, and we'll go to different people and get a point from other people. Any volunteers to be the sacrificial lamb on this and give us their first response that they would give?
I guess I can start while people are kind of putting up their hands. I can give one. Often when something like this comes up, the kind of first question is, do we have requirements? Are there, are we in a jurisdiction? Are we in a federal? Do we have legal citations? Is there what I like to call grounding information we can provide?
Okay, so I pulled a fast one on us because I said we're all working to the same organization. But assuming that you're talking to your boss at your organization and you'd have to collect all that grounding information.
Yeah.
Today we're all doing separate, but fair point. Okay, so we would need to make sure that we're on the same page with what that information is. Great, thank you, Troy. Okay, someone else have another response.
We could also use the chat if people don't want to open their mics. And again, just raise your hand and I can allow you to open your mic. There's one in chat there.
I want to be able to respond to people and ask some questions about the response too. So if you're going in the chat because you want to be shy and stay away from my target, I think, I don't know, the G is for GLG, but I think you're raising a good point, but you need to explain why, what you mean, because as the boss, I said to myself, I'm not sure why I need IG people if I can just go to ChatGPT. So in my mind, anything that you're going to say is just to protect your job. Like that's my first thing, and unless you can establish something very specific that you are doing, I'm going to think you're just trying to save your job here. So is there something specific that you can refer to us about what it is that you're matching when you say your needs? Because that sounds just like, oh, everything has to match our needs. You're welcome to put it there.
Yeah, I'll allow you to speak here. There you go. You can go ahead and unmute your mic.
Okay, sounds good. I'm Greg, by the way.
Hi, Greg.
Hi. Yeah, I just know from a few things I've been doing recently, trying to bring somebody else's work under your own standards definitely takes more time than in some cases writing it yourself. So that would be kind of the point that I would stress. As well, one of the other points I did was kind of along Troy's, which was AI is not going to necessarily know the Canadianized version of what we need. So being an American company, that's probably, what the focus would be on. So modernizing it and Canadianizing it, or doing it to your own provincial level, is potentially going to take a lot more time than what it would just to write it yourself.
Okay, so I've got 2 things I want to take out of what you said there. The first is, because I asked for a specific about matching needs, you've given me a nationalization specific, a localization specific. It's got to be an American to Canadian. That's one thing. But you said it may not be worth our time. And I assume you haven't done any investigation into how long that would actually take us, because we've just asked you 5 minutes ago if you could do this for me. So you haven't had time. So is there a way that you could word that makes it clear that you have a role? Although I would have to say, I think nationalization, Canadian American, would apply all the way across the board to all the corporate services. But let's assume it's particularly germane here to information governance because of particular rules. Is there a way that you can offer that forward as our contribution there?
I guess from my perspective, I would use an example of other things that we've done that may have shown the additional work that is required for that stuff.
Okay, I'm pushing towards get something. I'm going to put your point just on hold, Greg. Appreciate you putting it forward, and I'm going to come back to it.
Thanks.
Does anyone else have something that they would respond to a boss?
I can provide another one too. Oh, there we go, Alicia. I can allow you to speak. Okay, yeah, you should be able to unmute now.
Great, thanks, Troy. I was just going to make the point that, with all of these LLMs, you have to have a detailed prompt, right? And
Sorry, you have to have?
well, just in general, to use a large language model, no?
I'm challenging the you. We will need. We will
Okay.
need. So say it
Sure.
again. Say it again.
So we'll need a detailed prompt in order to use the large language model. And I don't see anyone other than an information governance professional being able to provide a detailed enough prompt in order to actually produce some relevant results.
There is a very straightforward answer that says, this is my role. Okay. You say one of the things that I do is help formulate the prompt in a way that will meet and then the needs. That's substantive, because your answer, if they don't do it, is who's going to formulate this prompt? If not, are you going to take responsibility for it? The issue I had with Greg, with the Canadian American is that something information management people would take on? It might be true that it needs to be localized. Is that the role of the information management group? Maybe, may not be, depending on the area. But if that's the case, then your response would be, we can do that. We can use ChatGPT, and we need someone to take on the role of validating the localization to make sure that it was appropriate for Canadian. And that will take time. We don't know how much time that's going to be. Fair enough. Okay, thank you, Alicia. Someone else? Rick, you had one you were going to throw up.
Oh, and Jane as well here. I'll let Jane,
good.
you want to?
Hi, Jane.
Hi.
Jane.
On the other side of the prompt, on the output side, the subject matter expert would be needed to identify some otherwise indiscernible miswordings that may seem correct to a layperson.
I really like that. I think we can shorten that to a, I'm just going to try wording, because I agree with what you're saying, but I'm part of what I'm doing is I'm preserving the role of the IG person. So yes, we could do that, but we in IG we would need somebody too, and we would propose it's us, take on the role of validating the truth of the output. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's
okay. Because otherwise you ask, who's going to validate the truth of the output? That's a role that I think we can take on. That is an IM. Who's going to validate that the output complies with Canadian rules? Okay, good enough. Great, thank you, Jay. How about any other?
Rick, do you just want to speak, Rick? You should be able to speak.
Sure. I was just saying, I always think of us, our community, our records and information management professional community. I think of us kind of as catchers behind the plate, in these kind of situations where somebody has to be the catcher behind the plate and actually catch the ball, the draft information that chat might come up with, because it might come up with several different versions of what it thinks is the right content for a particular situation. Somebody that knows something about what we do has to be that catcher to filter that information and create corporate culture-centric content out of that kind of draft information that chat does. You can't just let it go and create content. Somebody has to be in front of it to make sure that it's correct in the end.
Okay, so you're talking about correctness there.
Correctness, yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. I think one of the problems we have in information management in getting people to understand what we do is that we do not articulate what we are taking responsibility for. Even if we say we're responsible for life cycling the information, yeah, but what do you actually do? Or what part is yours? And you have much stronger case to make if you can say, oh, I'm responsible for this integrity and security of the data. Not I take it, I know exactly what you're looking at. I'm responsible for the truth of the output. I'm responsible for the applicability of the output to the Canadian situation. Something very specific that you are taking responsibility for, that if you don't, somebody else has to. That's your strongest argument. So what are the other things that we take responsibility for, or that we would be prepared to help? Anyone else?
Jane, did you have something else, or your hand was still up, or I just didn't lower it?
No, nothing else from me.
Okay.
I think, it's one thing to say, I'm responsible for taking care of the patient. It's another thing to say, I'm responsible for the health of the patient. And if you want to make your role known better, you're far better to find the attributes that we're taking responsibility for than the process by which we do it, which is life cycling or disposition or all these different things that we do, classification. Those are all processes. They're not attributes. Go ahead, Ken.
So I kind of wrote this as like an argument paragraph, not an argument paragraph, but a justification paragraph. So I might be kind of counter to your instructions, and some of the discussion I'll leave out of my paragraph, but I just wanted to read like the first couple sentences and kind of get your take on this. So I assume I'm talking to the boss and I say, well, we can use the AI, whatever, large language model, to create a new IG policy. It can help us with research. It can suggest which issues need to be addressed. We've already talked about standards and legislation, so that's great. It can even provide boilerplate language or even a first draft. And the first draft can even be written using our organization's policy format. And then you start, we've already talked about justifying or correcting the product. That's kind of where I'm stopped now, kind of thinking, what else would we be responsible for?
I love that approach. And actually in this particular session, at the end, towards the end of the session, I talk about what the other things that it could do. But I think when you start that way, the way you just did, you are showing that you want to be part of the solution, not that you think ChatGPT is a threat to your job. Okay, so I really like your approach that way. Sure, we can use it. And we could use it for A, B, C, D, and E. It's great there. It helps us. Okay, and then we need to go on and say what we just talked about. Somebody needs to take responsibility for the truth of the output, though.
Right.
Somebody needs to take responsibility for X. Absolutely. Your stuff comes first, and then something comes after. So if I can just pick on you here for a little bit, what do we have to feed it? What information would we have to feed it about us in order for it to come out with a good first draft?
That's a good point. So our policy format, we have to put parameters around what the policy is. So we're talking about information governance. So we need to explain to it as best our idea of information governance, our locations, so that it can know what the standards and legislation are. We might even need to feed it the standards and legislation so it doesn't imagine things. Let's see, do we have past samples that we can provide it?
Okay.
Let's see, what
All
else?
good stuff. Anyone else have some ideas? It's all good stuff. The other types of things that we should be feeding the beast in order to get a good first draft.
The one that I often do is just actually stating the goals of the policy, like just explicitly stating this is why we're doing it as well. I often find gets us a better
We'll
result.
need to feed it goals. Okay. What else? I don't think policy samples and you've talked about samples, you've talked about sort of style, format, you've talked about feeding it governance, and you've talked about source material, so to speak, legislation and things, although to a certain degree, those aren't our policy, we're just carrying those out. But I think there's more stuff it would have to know in order for it to give us a good information governance policy.
Do you think that it would need to know the actual business functions and activities of the organization?
I would think so. What's your take?
I'm not sure.
I would think so. I would also think it would need to know the kinds of information holdings we have. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So so now somebody in this organization is going to need to be responsible for feeding it the kinds of the input on the kinds of information that we have that its policy is going to need to govern. You know, if you're not doing it, boss, that sounds like an information management person we would need there.
Sorry, I don't want to capitalize this, but does this kind of mean that we just feed it as much information about our information governance environment as possible?
Well, okay. If you've talked about using it as a first draft, right? And that approach means that we have human intervention that comes in after that first draft is there. So what are the things that we would be checking for? Any of those things you could put in prior to the first draft. Not necessarily, but somebody needs to take responsibility either for feeding them to the machine prior to the first draft or for reviewing them in the draft itself once it comes out. So I didn't want to tell you that you have to give them that information, but it would seem to me that somebody needs to take responsibility for it at one end of the input or the other. Make sense?
Yep.
Anyone else? Any other thought?
No other hands.
Okay. All right. If I asked you, what are the other things that it can do with our policy development process, what would you answer to that? One is produce a first draft. That's one thing it could do. What else could it do?
As you move through the life cycle of the policy, often what we'll do is update management implementation procedure on policy. You can kind of keep moving through what the policy is for and does, right?
Okay. So it could identify areas that need to be looked at consequentially because of what we're doing in the policy. Is that fair enough? Maybe make those changes or suggest those changes, maybe not. Proofread, reword. Thank you. I think that's where we're getting it's a large language model. It is great at working with language. You can absolutely ask it to say, I'd like you to review our policy suite and see if we have any conflicts. I'd like you to review the suite and see if there's any duplication. Because, I mean, from my perspective, if you've heard me before, any policy statement or rule only needs to be in one policy. And after it's been approved in one policy, we can all use it. It's a truth. We can tell people about it without needing to put it in another policy. So it can identify areas of duplication. You can ask it to reproduce the material. Once you have a final product, you can ask it to generate that material in multiple ways. So I can get a policy, but how about an executive summary of the policy? How about a manual explaining this policy to the front end people? How about I'd like an HTML page that I can put up to explain something. It will do all this stuff. It generates it. You can also ask it, if you feed it a policy, you got some of these, 40-page policy, and you say, please separate policy from standard, from procedure, from guidance. It will do that. It actually does that very well. It distinguishes, and very often, I find we tend to put things in policy language. People must do this, employees should do this, but in fact, what we're doing is setting a standard or creating a procedure. And if you ask it to separate all those, it will do that. It will not, it doesn't understand the respectful language stuff yet. So if you have employees must do this and you say, write this rewrite it, redraft it in a way that doesn't have a parent-child dynamic, it will say employees must please do that. So it really doesn't handle that stuff a lot. You can also ask it, what are the risks of any particular statement? We've made a policy decision that we're doing X. What are the risks that you see there? And you can go further. If we make this decision, what kind of opposition would we see? It's a tool to help us, but somebody does need to ask it the right questions. One thing that I wanted to point out about the, when you talk about the AI, and that's bias. So I've got 2 points to make on that. First point is that we as workers tend to aim to excellence for a product. That's our goal. We would like an excellent product at the end of the day. ChatGPT aims for mediocrity. By definition, it's right in the middle. Unless you tell it what constitutes excellence, it will have no idea how to move that from middle of the road up. When it comes to the bias stuff, I've heard people say, oh, I have to worry about ChatGPT having biases. I'd like to correct that that statement. It's a little too generalized. Everybody has biases. You can be nothing wrong with having biases. We can be biased in favor of diversity. We can be biased in favor of economy or in favor of ecology. We have all kinds of biases. Nothing wrong with the bias. The problem is with an unknown bias. That's where we have an issue. So are there unknown biases that the system has? And when you talk about setting it, you want it not to aim for mediocrity, you want to aim for excellence. You want to control the biases. I don't use the word eliminate bias, because we all have a bias. You can't eliminate it, but it's like saying, I don't have an accent. Everybody else has an accent and I don't have an accent. Of course you have an accent. Of course you have a bias. If you have an opinion, you have a bias. Nothing wrong with that. The problem are the unknown biases that interfere, the uncontrolled biases that take over. That's where we have our problem. Okay, anything else somebody sees that they want to add to just? Suggesting wording. I love using this for suggesting wording. I use it all the time. For somebody who teaches people how to write policies respectfully, I'm really bad at writing letters respectfully. And I use ChatGPT to help me fix those. I use it to suggest words. Listen, we're looking for a word that means takes responsibility for, but it means takes active responsibility for, and will continue to the end. You feed it that kind of description, it will come up with really good words for you. Do multiple refinements of prompts to get it close to excellence. So I guess, so the first question is, do we know what excellence is in the organization you're working for? So Ken, you would have a bit of a challenge because you work for a lot of different organizations and their definition of excellence must vary from organization to organization. So it would seem that I know you've talked about, moving the organization closer and you talk about its goals, but those goals to me, I think would be part of the definition of what excellent is. Troy mentioned putting in goals at the beginning. If you, when I say it aims for mediocrity, if you ask for a lease on their IG, it will find you, out of all the IG policies that it can get its hands on, it will find you the median, the one with the phrases used most often, with the wording used most often. Remember, it's applied statistics. That's all it's doing. So it's going to bring you a pyramid. At the top is the stuff that is absolutely most used, and then the outliers that are less used go onto the periphery. So that's why I say you're aiming for mediocre. One of the things that you can do is make sure you're excluding in the research portion things that are not like you. So if you are a oil and gas company, then maybe you really want to be looking at those in oil and gas companies. The more esoteric your organization is, the harder time you are going to have to find a policy that's going to meet that. So the bottom line for me on that question is, what is the answer? The answer is absolutely, we can use it for, here's what it does well, bing, 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 bing. And here's our role. You want to say, and somebody needs to check for truth. Somebody needs to check for the applicability of the output, and applicability to what? Localization to Canada, applicability to our information assets, relevance to our classification scheme, whatever it is. Somebody needs to check that output when it comes out. And information management people, I think, are really well positioned to check those things. But in order to do that, you have to be able to say what you're checking for. Because if somebody else in the organization stands up and says, no, no, we check to make sure the classification is good, we're going to have an issue. I mean, you might say that that's not their role, okay, but we want to find things that nobody else is taking ownership of. So if that makes sense, can you just put a yes in the, a Y into the chat? Just say it, because I can't see everybody. I want to normally see people nodding and I can't see nodding. So if that makes sense, and up, okay, good. Good, good. Everybody else, if you don't have a Y in the chat, I'm assuming you're thinking, what a jerk. Okay. All right, thank you. Good. So the role here, I think, is the lesson is, in order to stay relevant, we need to position ourselves within the solution and identify what parts of the solution we are going to take accountability for. That's how we ensure our seat at the table. I want to take the next few minutes just to talk about whether or not we need an AI policy. Okay, because I know a lot of people are waiting to put together an AI policy. When COVID came out, we had all kinds of people panicking that they needed a COVID policy. When cannabis was legalized, we had all kinds of offices around, because this is a Canadian group, all kinds of offices panicking that they need a cannabis policy. We don't have a cannabis policy, everybody's going to show up stoned. That's what's going to happen. So starting with the cannabis example, from my perspective, absolutely they do not need a cannabis policy any way, shape, or form if their policy suite were set up properly. So assuming if it's set up properly, they will have a list, they will have a set of procedures on things that they do when people bring illegal things into the office, whether that's contraband or, I don't know, stolen goods or drugs, whatever it is that they're not allowed to bring in. So that's one list of things, and they'll have a set of procedures to deal with it. They also will have a list of things that they consider intoxicating and a set of procedures about what is it that they do when somebody arrives intoxicated by alcohol, drugs, or whatever. All that happened with the cannabis legislation is that cannabis moved from this list to this list. There's no need to change any policy if your policy stuff was intact. When it came to the COVID policy, we got all kinds of people walking around saying we need a COVID policy, but if you'd asked a policy specialist, they would have said, no, we don't do a COVID policy. What we need to do is go to HR and say, what changes do you need to make to the HR policy because of COVID? And go to security. What changes do we need to make to the security policy because of COVID? Because COVID is just a situation. It's not going to be, it's not the first, it's not going to be the last. So go to IM. What changes, if any, do we need to make to the IM policy because of COVID? That will cover our grounds much better than creating a brand new policy silo. So my concern about an AI policy is I wonder if we're creating a policy silo. And my question, and I'm not an AI expert by any means, but my question is, what would you govern in AI? What would you make a statement about that doesn't already have a home in some other policy in the organization? Like, we already have rules about not releasing private information. We have rules about the security of information. We have rules about who's taking ownership of the documents we produce. And we've got rules about a lot of this stuff. So I have thrown out on the forums at ARMA and some of the other forums, asked people, can you give me an example of a policy statement or topic that doesn't have a home in any other policy? And I've only been able to get one answer to me that actually sounds like it's on its own. And that answer is a policy around the use of prompts, keeping the prompts with the output, or how you handle prompts. And that's because prompt is a new thing that we didn't have before, is a new, that's a new, that does need to be addressed. And I could see if you wanted a policy that addressed prompts. I'm open if anybody else has any other thought about what we would put in an AI policy that doesn't already get covered in everything else we do. I'm certainly all ears and happy to share, happy to learn. The technical, the things about, the security and this, like, the IT group is handling that right already, and the security people are handling it. Okay, so I'm just going to reword what you said, only because I am agnostic as to what the policy should be. So you need to take a position, and I don't. So I would say we need a statement about whether, when we use an LLM, should there be a footnote? We need some kind of decision about that. That's fair enough. I could see that. Is there something special we do with the outputs that would need some kind of policy? I'm having a hard time seeing it. Any other thoughts? No, I like yours, giving Ken, that makes sense. So I think you've given me number 2. That's a hard one, because, and I think part of the argument of showing your worth to the organization is when they say, we have privacy concerns, we've got those covered. We already have those covered in our policy. Well, we have concerns about how long we keep this information. Well, you know what? We have a policy about life cycling. We have a policy about retention. So we got that covered too. So I don't know. Any other thoughts? Any
One
other?
thing I'll-
Go ahead.
I got a little bit of a comment too, especially as some of the LLMs become more of platforms and not just technology. For example, like if you use ChatGPT and you've got a paid account, there is some kind of memorization to that. And just to go back to the idea that we should already have policies around using technologies, the same could be said for thinking about it how we have things in Microsoft. Microsoft has their graph backend with databases and content stores. We're in some cases, things like ChatGPT are just other iterations of using platforms that should have policies in place, just like you were saying. It's nothing new. Yes, it's a new technology, but Microsoft already has graphs and databases of your information. Same thing is happening with some of the technologies out there as well. Around
Yeah, I
LLMs.
think so. And if I can just pick up on your point, Troy, if in fact we don't have something covering one of those, that's a hole that we need to patch, and it's a hole bigger than AI. So
Yeah.
AI, the fact that we're looking at it in the context of AI might point out the hole, but it can be quite broad. So fair enough point.
Agree.
Any other comments from someone? It's interesting that from your perspective, you said something like this is not really new tech, and we know it's not new technology. It's not really new stuff. What we have is a lot of new fear. A lot of new fear of the unknown. I know of at least one jurisdiction in the States that has told all its government people absolutely not no using AI in any way, shape, or form until we come up with a policy on it. If we, to the degree, and I'll say it this way, if AI is a multifaceted animal, it has an information side, it has a tech side, it has a process side, it has a business side. We would like to take care of the information side. We need the IT group to take care of the tech side. We need the business process group to take care of the business, etc. Okay. So, and then within our side, we can highlight but I would have said that we should be able to go to almost every policy that we have and add the words and artificial intelligence into the definition of information if we have one, or into the scope. And that should cover 95% of what we need to do, as opposed to creating a brand new independent policy silo based on AI itself. That would be my sense. Okay. And if no other thoughts, then I'm going to throw this back to my host. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Great. Rick, do you want to wrap up and say a few words about, I know you mentioned a couple of our upcoming sessions.
Yeah, thanks, Troy. Yeah, thanks everybody. That was Lewis. Thank you so much for the presentation today. It was really thought provoking. I know personally it made me think quite a bit as we were doing the presentation today too. So thank you for that. It's always interesting when you hear somebody that does policy for a living like you do speak about that whole idea of what should go when and where and how and everything. It sure opens up your mind a lot. I hope everybody else was thinking the same thing I was. What a great session. Anyway, just to say that the IM Canada Connect sessions will be marketing material should be coming to you for your IM Canada Connect sessions through your chapter. If they aren't, sign up on the Learn With Us on our westernim.com website, and we'll make sure that you get the marketing material for those sessions on an ongoing basis if appropriate. The next session for IM Canada Connect will be our Christmas session, and Troy will, as always, have something interesting and fun for us for the Christmas session. In January, we'll have Halifax chapter doing a session. Courtney Bain will be doing a session in January from the Halifax chapter, so that's going to be really exciting. Courtney is the information manager for Dalhousie University in Halifax, so I've known Courtney for a whole lot of years, and more than she and I would like to think about probably at times. But looking forward to her presentation in January. And Western IM does have a Learn With Us series, as I mentioned earlier at the start of the presentation today, that runs on a somewhat regular basis throughout the course of the year. all learning experiences, different things. This next one on December 4th will be about AI, actually, put on by our other partner, Daryl Schrader, who's the Director of Professional Services at Western IM. So it should prove to be another interesting session for sure. Thanks everybody for being on our session today. We really appreciate it. The ARMA community appreciates it, and just stay with us, and we all learn together. I'm really excited about that. It's all about our ARMA community here in Canada, and staying with the program. So I appreciate everybody coming. It's 11 o'clock. I'm going to give everybody back the rest of their day, and we'll look forward to seeing you for the Christmas session.
Good.
Thanks everybody. Thanks Lewis. Thanks Troy.
Rick, and thanks Troy for the technical behind the scenes.
Yeah. Thanks everybody.
Bye now.